Welcome and good afternoon to the UpSkill Works Forum series, where we engage business leaders, education and community leaders and other leading thinkers to look at and explore the key workforce issues our region and our nation confront. I'm Peter Beard, and I lead the Greater Houston Partnership's UpSkill Houston initiative, which brings together business, education, public, and community leaders to work together in developing a highly skilled workforce that our employers need, but also create good jobs and pathways to success for our region's residents. Before we get to our conversation today on the new mission, Transferable Talent, what employers need to know about hiring and retaining veterans, I just have a few housekeeping details. First, all attendees are muted throughout the entirety of this webinar. Please do not use the chat function for questions and answers, but we really do welcome Q&A. So please use the Q&A tab at the bottom of your screen. The chat function is really to communicate with our technical team here at the partnership. If you have any questions or comments, once again, please use the Q&A, and we will be making this an engaging and interactive opportunity. The Greater Houston Partnership and UpSkill Houston would like to acknowledge the 2021 UpSkill Houston Forum sponsors. Thank you to our sponsors, Accenture, Silver Eagle, and the law firm Winstead PC. Also HCA Houston Healthcare, Houston Community College, Lone Star College, Mustang Cat, San Jacinto College, Merrick, along with Dow and Western Governors University of Texas. I'd like to welcome Katrina Salazar of Silver Eagle Distributors, who will be introducing our session today, focused on hiring and supporting veterans in the workforce. Katrina, welcome.
Thank you so much, Peter. How are you today?
I am well.
Great.
Hope you're doing well as well.
Thank you, I am. The first thing I definitely love to say is that Silver Eagle in Houston is proud to be a partner with UpSkill Houston, and really being a partner in supporting these conversations on important workforce topics throughout the region. Tapping into talent is really a huge concern for any employer, and at Silver Eagle, we really understand the level of talent that our citizen soldiers and veterans do possess. For those of you who do not know, Silver Eagle is the Houston-based distributor for Anheuser-Busch products. So while I can imagine that many of you may know and love many of the brands that we represent, as an organization, we really do pride ourselves on our military and veteran-focused initiatives. For the third consecutive year, Silver Eagle has actually been awarded a 2022 military-friendly employer. This does include first-time recognition as a military-friendly spouse employer. We've received the #3 in the top 10 military-friendly brands designation, and we're also named a military-friendly supplier diversity program. At Silver Eagle, we really do pride ourselves on also creating community resource groups for our veteran employees to not only network and build off of the camaraderie of their shared service experiences, but to also allow our employees to provide great input on the programs and future initiatives that they're really passionate about bringing to the forefront of our team and organization. Today, we are going to hear from Stephanie Drake, who serves as the Executive Director of NextOp Veterans. Steph will be sharing with us key skills and experiences that veterans have developed in their service to our country and how employers can top this talent pool. Steph is in a really unique position to provide insights on this topic because she has served as an officer in the United States Marine Corps and then went on to develop a successful career at Shell Oil Company. She's worked in contracting and procurement, materials management, and logistics operations in her time with Shell. Steph is also a graduate of the United States Naval Academy, where she majored in oceanography and was commissioned in 2005 as an officer in the United States Marine Corps. During her service to our country, Steph held multiple roles at Marine Corps Air Station, Cherry Point, Camp Lejeune, Marine Barracks, Washington. She deployed to Fallujah, Iraq in support of Operation Iraqi Freedom as the executive officer for Security Company, Combat Logistics Battalion 8, and officer in charge of Fallujah's First Sisters of Fallujah program. While on active duty, Steph also earned her MBA from Boston University. She left active duty in 2013 and moved to Houston, where she began working for Shell Oil and joined NextOp in 2019. Steph serves as a Marine reservist and is also a Blue and Gold officer for the United States Naval Academy. She also serves as the board of directors on the U.S. Naval Academy Texas Gulf Coast Alumni Association. Given Steph's extensive background, she can speak to us on both sides of the hiring equation. She brings key insights to our skills service members develop and how those skills are really critical to the many occupations and workforce settings. So here's some of her insights and experiences on how employers can recognize the critical skills veterans possess and the value that these skills can bring to our workplaces. Later on in our conversation, Carla Thompson of Turner Industries Group will join the conversation to share the proactive approach that Turner Industries uses to recruit, develop, and retain skilled veterans in its workforce. Carla is Turner's Workforce Development Manager for the Western region and has solid credentials and proficiency in workforce hiring, training, and retention. In addition, she has broad experience in workforce development management, craft training management, and education. She has also worked in the power, nuclear, and industrial maintenance and construction industries. In 2009, Carla earned credentials as a National Center for Construction Education and Research Master Trainer and as an NCCER Administrator. Her major strengths include administering NCCER programs, developing and setting up craft training and apprenticeship programs, and effectively collaborating with area businesses and schools. Carla also serves as the chairperson of the East Harris County Manufacturers Association's Craft Training Subcommittee, where she led both industry leaders together to develop competency maps and progressions for the industrial construction crafts. Carla is a member and past chair of the Craft Training Committee for the Associated Builders and Contractors Construction and Maintenance Education Foundation. She is also a member of the Craft Training Committee and the ABC CMEF Youth Committee. She serves on ABC's Industrial Committee and the Gulf Coast ABC High School Committee. She has held executive position for the state of Virginia on the Southwest Virginia Workforce Development Board. To both Carla and Steph, thank you so much for joining us, and we welcome you to our UpSkill Works Forum. I'm really looking forward to a great and insightful conversation, including the both of you, and I'll definitely turn our conversation back to Peter.
Thanks, Katrina. We really appreciate Silver Eagle and its support. So Steph, it is great to have you today. And thank you for your service to your country. We really, do appreciate all that you've done, for your country, but also here in Houston. And I've really been looking forward to this conversation, because it will help us really understand what NextOp is doing and how it can be helping employers and help our service members. And I see we have someone in the chat saying something about Go Navies. I don't know what took place this weekend, but I suspect you were quite happy.
I am very happy, Peter. So a little bit surprised, frankly, that we underdog victory there, but it was a nice win.
So let's start with a softball question, which is really tell us a little bit about NextOp, what it does, and some of the results that it's achieved today, because it's been a great story for the last 6 or 7 years.
Sure, I'd love to, and thanks for having me today. So NextOp is actually a Houston-born nonprofit, so I think something that this city should be very proud of. We were born in 2015 out of both a need for veteran employment support and oil and gas talent need, right? And that's what our founding board members kind of put together, these two pieces of a puzzle, and said, oh my gosh, there's this talent and we have jobs, what's going on here? And so as the founding board members and initial staff of NextOp put the puzzle together, it became very clear that this middle enlisted talent population that we serve, which is E3 to E7, and you'll hear us refer to throughout this hour, as 22 to maybe 28 years old, possibly some sort of post-secondary education, maybe a 2-year degree, maybe even a 4-year degree, but not an absolute. Tons of world and life experience couldn't land a career, departing the service, and then became sort of a cyclical problem, right? So they were dependent on maybe additional social services. Their family was struggling with this move into the civilian world and a move back to Houston, because almost all of Houston's veteran population, which is one of the top 3 veteran populations in the nation, depending on who you're reading statistics from, we're often number 1 if it's by metro area. They come from all over the country and they land here, right? And need that initial career that's a great fit and kind of a springboard into all the great things they can do in the community. And so out of all this, NextOp was born to become this bridge between companies. No company has ever told me they don't want to hire veterans, right? Even before I was with NextOp, everyone wants to do it. I think most people, even at the surface level, see the value, but actually doing it intentionally and purposely and efficiently is difficult, right? And so the same thing happens on the other side, especially with this population. They don't have a collegiate network to lean on like maybe I did, right? They don't have years and years of time in the military. Maybe it's 4 to 8 typically for our candidates. So they don't have an extensive personal network either. And their friends from back home, if they're from here, aren't necessarily well built in their careers either. So they rely on our network with corporate partners to learn about all these different industries that are here, these wonderful companies. And we really work to kind of coach each party to understand each other and find these best fits. And so since 2015, we've helped place over 2,700 candidates into gainful employment. We actually don't say yes to every company. We'll even kind of counsel or consult with companies and recommend they look at other roles or different wage structure potentially to attract this talent, because they've got some pretty significant experience compared to peers.
No, and I think one of the things you and I were talking about recently is, when you think about it, most of these individuals have probably left high school and entered the service and really haven't been in the more traditional civilian job market. So they're not really familiar with what you do. And they've been I don't want to say indoctrinated, but they've been exposed to this great system that the military provides in terms of skills development, as well as getting assigned to various different roles. Not that they control that. So
right.
Do you want to tease that out a little bit so people just understand that's a very different mindset when we're talking to individuals?
Yeah, so our wonderful couple of points there, and steer me back if I miss one, because I heard a couple of things I want to talk to on that. So one, our service members actually don't pick their line of work, sometimes, but typically no. It's needs of the service, and you take some aptitude tests, and whatever matches up and whatever space is available to school, you're off and running. And so even for officers, we kind of go through a similar process. And because of that, I think it surprises companies sometimes when maybe someone who is maybe a logistics truck driver doesn't want to be a truck driver when they depart the service. But at the same time, even so, if you use myself as an example, I'm a logistician by trade in the Marine Corps, but I've done military police work, and I've done historical preservation, actually, believe it or not, in DC of buildings from the 1800s. And so you end up with this really varied skill set that would surprise people and would never come through on a resume from especially our younger enlisted service members without some help from us to tell them, oh gosh, let's highlight these things, even though they might have been like a little bit of a blip on your overall career.
So, I mean, you began to personalize it a little bit, but I think by describing your own personal journey, because here you are with an oceanography degree doing all the different things you did. But I'm assuming that as you joined the military, you had, lots of different experiences. And obviously as an officer, you're in a leadership role as well. So, I mean, just describe your personal journey, not only in the skills you developed in the military, but also even your own transition into the civilian workforce, because you didn't have a NextOp to rely on, I would assume.
Yeah, no, this is all absolutely spot on. And I'll highlight one thing too. And so I had immediate leadership opportunity as a second lieutenant out of the Naval Academy, right? And that was one of the things that attracted me to the Marine Corps specifically, but also the service, that incredible opportunity to lead. But so do our young service members. And I'll use my Marines as an example, but by the time they are 20, they're typically leading a team of 4, right? And by the time they're maybe in their mid-20s, they're probably leading a team of at least 10. Which I did not realize how abnormal that was until I hit the civilian world. And, my first team lead opportunity at Shell, I was leading a team of, probably 20 to 30 at any given time, which was, 80 less than the team that I'd left the service leading. And so it's just, something to be aware of is there's leadership just all different directions in the military, and opportunity to hone those skills because of what we entrust this population to do in an operational environment. I think we've gotten a little bit away from OIF and OEF, but if you look at the NEO, right, the extraction from Afghanistan that just happened in August, those were young service members for the most part, making those critical decisions, leaning on training that they've had, working with counterparts and peers and asking questions and making risk assessments and decisions in the moment, which kind of speaks to some of what the training and then the opportunities afford a service member to gather from an experience perspective. And I mean, self-included, I was actually tallying it up while Katrina was kindly reading my bio because it sounded kind of long, but I really did have 7 different jobs in my 8 years of active duty service in the Marine Corps. And some of them were, a dual hat opportunity, and they were just so varied. I ran an airport as my first job, right? And then, and I trained female Iraqi police in Fallujah. And then I ended up doing more, things you might be more familiar with, like marching and ceremonial type things in DC. So all to say, I think it speaks to the adaptability of the population. I was trained as a logistics officer, but along the way, I became competent in other skills, and that is not special to me. That is something we do to all of our service members. And that's one of the things that actually comes up on resumes, and that we coach our service members and our companies, is that, it may kind of red flag if someone's not familiar, that it's completely typical to have a number of roles in a short amount of time, and not necessarily have them even look related, right? So definitely something to be mindful of from a company perspective, but also something we have to coach our talent, because they have no idea that someone's gonna maybe toss their resume out because they see that it looks like they're job hopping. Right?
So there are a couple things you mentioned in there that I think are important probably for us to tease out for our private sector employer partners. One, this movement of people is pretty frequent. So it's so we shouldn't interpret it as like, well, they got bored and decided to go and skip to another job. They were basically assigned to go to that job, but then they have to adapt fairly quickly into that new role. So they demonstrate adaptability and learning, it sounds like, as well as problem solving. I mean, what are some of the core skills? Because we hear a lot about what employers are looking for, as do you. And we need to be mindful of that we need to probably take the lens off that we're used to seeing in the civilian workforces. Like if someone's moved 4 different times in 2 years, you're like, what's going on there?
I mean, I think overall teamwork actually comes to mind, right? So we end up having these diverse teams built from service members across the country, all different walks of life, right? All different racial and ethnic backgrounds, different upbringings, everything, and put them all together. And then you're right, we rotate them fairly frequently. So there's a little bit of a constant churn of new folks coming in and folks that have been there for a while departing. But at the end of the day, everything we do is as a team. And when you ask a service member a question in an interview, right, or ask them what's important to them, they'll always tell you it's the, in my case, it's the Marines to the left or to the right, right? That's what their focus is on during the mission, just working as that team and that unit. And I think it transcends. So when you do rotate, that I can't do everything and I don't know everything. So I think sometimes we give the impression, and maybe the media and the movie theaters help with this, that we're very rigid. But in all honesty, we're actually not. So we're kind of rigid when we need to be, but we also know, we know how to follow procedures, we know how to write them, right? And we build them out, but we also know at some point we may need to deviate from this. And what we really try and coach in our younger service members is knowing how to make that risk assessment when they're 18, 19, right? And it translates so well. I'm sure Carla can speak to this, to the safety environment in oil and gas, and the operational environment, but also just regular, any industry, the ability to assess whether it's financial or business risk and know when does someone need to know something and when do I have it? So those are a couple.
But you also shared with me another nuance that happens in the military that, if not corrected, could be taken different in the private sector, which is the team wins, which means we talk about we, And if there's a failure, it's usually because there was a breakdown in someone and then it's an I. And so,
Yeah.
you know, when folks are talking, they generally talk about the we, which then you're like, what did you specifically do? And it's kind of like, no, we did this, I think.
Yes, you're spot on. Actually, you asked me earlier, what my transition was like. And I was lucky. My population in general, what's called a junior military officer, an officer in the kind of their first 8 years of service. It's pretty low hanging fruit. We all have at least one degree. We're relatively close to our education background. We've all just led teams at the tactical and operational level for 8 years, right? But I worked with a headhunter, they're a for-profit headhunter, and I was able to go to an interview conference, interview with 13 companies, come out with multiple offers and move on. And strangely enough, I actually didn't really understand all the companies and industries still, even with all of that help. And that frankly, that's what we try and provide, right, to our talent population. That's maybe not as much low-hanging fruit for the corporate space. But there's all these different kind of nuances that play into what makes this successful transition, right? And part of it is not know you don't know what you don't know, and someone has to help you get there.
So I mean, describe a little bit about how NextOp helps individuals bridge this, because we've talked about some of the user experience, user research we've done for some of our other initiatives, and it really probably, I know you provide kind of career guidance and coaching so people kind of understand, like, this is the world of the job market, but you need to be thinking in these areas. And then I know you also help by providing kind of support of folks that have entered the civilian workforce to help kind of mentor and guide, not just into the specific industry, but just generally to make that transition. And I know that's one of the strengths of NextOp, and I know it's expanded because of that quality.
Yeah. So what makes us unique is truly the one-on-one aspect of it, right? I tell people often, we actually don't do a job board and just broadly share all the jobs that our corporate partners have, because we're still not confident that our candidate pool can look at that and understand which roles would be right for them or best for them. So we take that, that's really our job, right? So our employment coordinators work one-on-one with each of our candidates. We usually have about 150 candidates at any given time that we're working with in different stages. And because of some recent changes in Department of Defense policy, they're now as far out as a year from their service timeframe of departing the service, or they're already in the community, right? And they've got here and they found us, after they got here and they need help. So it just depends. But for us, it's that one-on-one, and we're that translator, right? And we ask the companies questions too, like, do you really need someone with a certificate in this, or will this technical aptitude that this artilleryman, right, has gained, being able to tactically employ a really technical piece of gear all over the place, would that, could we work with that, right? And so we'll try and break down some barriers on both sides, and we have barriers on the candidate side too, just in even understanding the industries. There's no way they know enough about what's out there, and so we love to bring our companies that we work with us to share what they do, what types of roles they have, and those kinds of things to help with that.
No, that's helpful. So you've mentioned the Department of Defense, and I know at various points it kind of is uneven in terms of how supportive they are. But I know that they continue to modify the programs because I think they do care about a couple things. One is they really do care about ensuring that there's a successful transition into the civilian workforce because, obviously they have education benefits and they have a whole bunch of other things. But they also, I think, care about the fact that, and you referenced it briefly, it's a pretty diverse talent pool that we can draw from, because it's probably at the middle enlisted level, much more representative of our population here in Houston. Whereas I think you mentioned at one point, the officers probably skew, not as diverse in terms of what's present in Houston. So there are a lot of things I think that DoD is interested in, but that you help facilitate.
Yes. So we do. Our population actually tends to be about 50%, a little bit over racially and ethnically diverse. And then you can layer on some other verticals of diversity on top of that, right? With at least 10% female, which is consistent with DoD, and all, the different, like the whole concept of you've been somewhere else in the world, you've experienced a whole nother culture. I mean, I can't tell you the impact of working with women in Fallujah had on me as a 24-year-old, right? And so to think I'm not unique, right? This is a theme for veterans across the board. So I think that's a piece of it. You're right, DoD, honestly, we call, if you've ever used the joke like turning an aircraft carrier, it can't happen on a dime. If you think about workforce, and Peter, you'll be the first one to say this, right? Workforce development, it's pretty dynamic.
Yeah.
Right. So, and especially the past 2 years, and there's really, I think they've realized there's no way for them to be able to do it all, right? They can't keep you as a impactful functioning service member till your last day and make sure that that very next day you have a new job lined up, right? So there's got to be a little bit of give and take on both sides of that. And they're leaning on external organizations a little bit more than they have in the past. And part of it was just kind of realizing and admitting that it's okay that they aren't able to do the whole thing, but they need to do the front part better and engage earlier so that we can do the back part with minimal impact to the service member's family, or really maximum impact in a positive way. So a couple of things they've done. When I went through the transition program, and any veterans in the room that are, probably 2018 and earlier, we did it a couple weeks before we got out of the service. It was way too late to start looking for your next career and start writing your resume. Peter mentioned this earlier, and I think it's worth sharing. As much as we do all these jobs and we're adaptable, at no point or very limited are we pursuing that job. Usually it's someone's telling us, okay, you're going to go do this next. So we don't actually interview in a corporate or civilian world setting the entire time, where we have to answer a question like, tell me about a time, right? And, and that's why we struggle. We don't say I, right? We say we in that setting, and it's so hard to get that out of us. But, typically, of course, that person had an impact in that. So DoD tries to combat all of this, right? And kind of reframe everything, and they can't do it all. But they've moved the timeline out a year, and they offer some new programs in the skill bridge space that are sort of trying the civilian world out for service members, and at the same time, companies trying out service members as basically free interns on the DoD's dime. And that's been hugely successful, predominantly so far in the officer and senior enlisted space. And we're really working toward, we actually just kicked off our own skill bridge program. We're approved by the DoD and Department of Labor to facilitate that same level of success for the enlisted space. So non-degreed internships, right?
So more like an apprentice, what we would say is more the apprenticeship work and learn kind of sets of opportunities, which probably includes the crafts and trades. But it also probably includes some of the new work that Accenture and Aon are doing here in Houston to look for like those IT roles. I'm going to also suggest another one that a lot of folks would probably, need to figure out how to, upskill service members with cyber. To your point, there is a mindset already with folks in the military about risk and, how do you protect, I would assume.
Yes, absolutely. It's a great fit from a capacity and skill set and all these things. The hard part is figuring out what a company or set of companies really want and choosing the right pathway to get there, because there's a lot of noise in this space too. And so that's another thing. The Skill Bridge offers the opportunity to work with a particular company and hone in on what they think is important from a certification or training perspective. But even Skill Bridge aside, if companies can clearly articulate that, okay, if you've got this kind of risk-oriented background and you have the capacity to learn, like these are the 4 things you need, that kind of information is really helpful to us, and that unlocks doors for a service member who's there's just so much out there to wade through, and I think Carla will probably speak to this later, but a lot of what service members are looking for is clarity, right? And they don't need black, white, rigid, but just an idea of, okay, if you come to this industry and work for this company, your first year or two probably looks like this. They like to see maybe expanded opportunity, and doesn't even need to be necessarily like promotion, but just expanded responsibility and what that offers them as they grow in a company. Because you can Google right now what a career in the military looks like for the next 20 to 30 years.
Oh, that's that's probably helpful for the military, but as you know, you can't kind of Google it here because there are very few that actually provide those progressions, partly because, you know, the skills in an innovation-based economy are changing so rapidly.
Yeah, and I think that's okay too. I think if you can just highlight, hey, it's pretty dynamic. Some specialties in the military are pretty linear and others are very varied. Mine was really varied in logistics, which I loved. Some are like artillery, I gave that example earlier. That's very linear. So service members kind of come from both walks, but if you can tell them, you know, hey, if you do really well, this is an example of where I could, you know, you might end up in 2 years and what your responsibilities might look like. That goes a really long way, and they can imagine themselves as part of the organization. So it's kind of like one piece of not only the hiring process, but ultimately retention too. They know there's growth of some kind in mind.
Okay, so I mean, at some point I want to bring Carla in. I mean, and also wanting to get the audience to ask some questions and answers. And I see there's one in there. But before I do that, what are some of the trends that you've seen in the skills bridge area for, you know, the middle enlisted folks? I mean, I think you referenced that at the senior enlisted, it's very different. But what are the trends in terms of what you're seeing for folks finding their opportunities? Or is it too early to tell?
It's a little bit early to tell, but so far we've quietly actually placed 11 in the past couple of months just to pilot it. And you know, I think some people might think, oh, this is definitely plant life and operations oriented, and others might think something else. It's been across the board, right? Okay. So I would say it's really not specific to an industry in terms of opportunity. It's probably a best fit if there's a champion somewhere in the organization or fairly close, right, in the structure that can make sure that you know, OJT is really used wisely and to validate the capacity of the veteran. And you know, the other piece of it is SkillBridge is very intentional. There's not a requirement to hire that individual at the end, right? So it's meant to be low risk for both and there's not a requirement for the candidate to accept a job offer, right? So that being said, it's from what I've seen historically, if it goes well for both parties, it's typically a very easy move to the next step.
So I guess one final question as we get to the Q&A, you know, there's a lot of training and development that takes place in the military, but there are also education benefits that occur while you're in the military, but when you come out of the military. Can you help, you know, the audience understand how that works? Because I think, you know, as folks leave the military, there's an opportunity about how we connect them to a community college or to some sort of, you know, boot camp that allows them to develop that last mile of skills that are going to be necessary.
Oh gosh, yes. So all fronts. So the military is actually a great advocate of education and training. And we tend to put people through some pretty well planned and executed training fairly regularly, right? And so we're no strangers to it, and we learn fast typically because we're exposed and it's varied. They've also, for as long as I've been associated with the military, been really expectant and enablers for service members pursuing additional education. Some of that's service related, but a lot of it is not, and they subsidize college courses when you're in. And so it's an interesting opportunity. We haven't cracked the nut on this one yet, Peter. We're working with one service in particular right now because we see a mismatch in skills and degrees. So we see service members pursuing, and I'll give an example, like HR and leadership. And then on the demand end, it's not really a high demand, right, occupation. And so this is where there's this incredible opportunity if employers can be really clear about, hey, these are the things I want. There's really, I think, further conversation warranted with community colleges, with the services and certain bases to figure out, are we offering that? And do the students know when they're picking this path what the end game is? So we've had some initial pretty promising conversations, but that's where I see the future of this dialogue. Post-service is pretty much all are eligible for GI Bill. Yeah. And our big push when we're talking with candidates is to make sure they're just using it wisely, right? So whatever they're using it on, or with whatever institution they're using it with, it's going to be a force multiplier for their family and their career, and not just a kind of a placeholder. But they do have the potential for being able to fund some or all of their own college education.
And so I know you have relationships with educational partners, and if someone were wanting to kind of strengthen that, who would they contact at NextOp?
They contact our programs director, Alan Whiteside. I'll drop his contact info into the chat.
Okay, so why don't we go ahead and bring Carla in, because I know you keep referencing Carla, and we need to bring her in because I think Turner Industries has been a great partner, I think, in a lot of context, but certainly they have valued, and they also span, I think, your footprint, which is not only here on the Gulf Coast of Texas, but over to Louisiana. And so Carla, welcome. How are you doing?
Hi, Peter. How are you? Steph, it's good to see you as always.
So, tell us a little bit about, Turner's commitment to hiring veterans and what you're seeing within that. And then we'll get into kind of like, what does your management look for, and kind of then have a dialogue with Steph on this.
Well, one of the things we do here at Turner Industries is we really do try to give the most specialty treatment to veterans looking to come to work. So if I have 3 candidates and one is a veteran, we're always going to look to the veteran candidate first. What helps us do that is the fact that many of my area managers are former Army, Navy, Air Force, or Marines. So, we know the value of hiring from military service. As far as like the kind of jobs that you can transfer into our company with, it is really more extensive than people think, because people don't realize that not only do we hire those pipe fitters, those welders, but there is a whole city of people that stand around that, that it takes to run our organization. So folks from logistics backgrounds a lot of times can get into warehousing and warehousing management. Folks with any kind of mechanical training can transfer into millwright and pipe fitting work with a little bit of time and help. Folks with degrees, with the years of service, that can maybe some construction management also, can work well into entry-level project controls. Electrical technician, MOSs can definitely would feed into E&I or electrical groups, and this is for industrial and commercial. Equipment operators, crane operators can always find a home with us. We look all the time for entry-level people. If you just want to come in at the beginning and learn, because the key here is you do have to have an industrial background for a lot of my jobs, but if you're willing to step in and do a little bit of schooling and learn, we can move you into those positions. But we also hire accountants, purchasing folks, IT, office clerks. In Houston, there's limited administrative jobs because our home office is in Baton Rouge, Louisiana, but we do have at times openings in administration.
So it sounds like one of the things that you've done as an employer has already begun to map kind of what you were referring to was those MOS codes, which are the military equivalent of like, these are the skills that folks have, into your other roles, so that you have a good sense of if someone's been in these roles, they would potentially have some experience if they were interested to come into these roles.
Absolutely. And NextOp helps us with this, because most of the veterans I hire come through NextOp, and they send me the resumes. I look for work for them, and they actually help these folks understand our needs before we ever even talk to them. And so it makes the conversation so much easier.
So what I'm hearing is NextOp helps, in essence, put in front of you a highly qualified applicant pool that you could hire from immediately, which, as an HR person, you're kind of like, if the less time I have to spend sorting through applications, the better off I am.
Amen. But the other thing we do, Peter, that a lot of other companies don't, if I don't have a job for them, once we have really honed in on what they really want to do, if they have the skill for it, we help them find jobs with other companies too. It's not just about us at Turner Industries. When we're talking to veterans, It's about giving veterans the opportunities and introducing them to our community.
And I think that's one of the strengths of, our industrial construction industry is they believe in that collaboration, that expanding that entire pipeline for the industry is a good thing to do. Because I think what you're also saying, and what I'm also hearing from you in terms of the work Turner is doing, is those qualified applicants, given kind of their backgrounds, get to full productivity in whatever role you put them into, and are probably, because you're a much more skills-based industry, progressing people probably at a quicker pace. Particularly in the, I would have to imagine that the military progresses in a much quicker way. And Steph, you can weigh in on that as well, but I'd like to hear from Carla as well. Carla?
Yeah, I was just going to say one thing that Carla hasn't mentioned yet that she does in particular is when she gets a veteran application not through us and it's not up to par, or she recognizes that they could use our help or even another veteran organization that we're connected with, she'll forward it our way. So that's something that I think is another best practice, because you never know when that's going to be a diamond in the rough and we can shoot it right back, or we can work with different entities to make sure that person gets the support they need.
So what I'm hearing, Steph, is one of the critical values you add, whether it's on the front end or this point of a cross referral, is I can get them ready so that they could be in a qualified applicant pool and save an HR manager time in terms of identifying that.
Yes, we, much like we don't do job boards, we also don't give any company our slate of candidates, because we really are aiming for that intentional connection and hope, 3, 10, whatever the right number is for what we've got in our candidate pool for a particular role. Or to Carla's point, sometimes we'll have a candidate we're like, this has got to be a great fit for somewhere in this industry or this company, and we'll shoot that over and say, do you all have anything right now that we don't know about or something coming up?
Mm-hmm.
So what are the other benefits you're getting, Carla, as you work with not only just the veterans, but NextOp? Because I think, part of it is, as we put this workforce system together, we've got to continue to work with partners like NextOp and others, one, to increase the aperture of the talent pool, but also how can they add value from your perspective as an employer?
Well, I'm going to tell you without a doubt, and of course I'm speaking as the mother of 2 Iraqi war veterans, the mother-in-law of a Marine and the wife of a Marine. To me, veterans hold so much value for any organization. The training they have gone through in the military, because they don't just train for 5 minutes, is incredible. It is saving me weeks and months of training when I hire a military candidate. I'm getting somebody who is used to scheduling. I'm getting somebody who is used to being on time. Getting somebody who 100% is going to get the job done because that's what they've been trained to do. They ask good questions. They are not afraid to lead when need be. They're just the best candidates to me for any jobs that we have. And I'm always going to give 100% of my support to NextOp and to any veteran looking to enter my industry.
So you mentioned one thing that I'd be interested in exploring a little bit more, which is, employees asking questions. And I get the sense that you'd prefer if someone were unclear to ask a question so that they get the clarity, which I suspect is a skill they have honed in the military, because the last thing they want to do is make a mistake. And I think that's an important skill set, but why is that so important from your perspective?
Well, when you're on a job site and there's a problem and there's problem solving that has to be done, being able to communicate first to your supervisors that you foresee a problem or you see a problem, and you're not afraid to step up and say, something's not right here. On our job sites, it is up to every employee not only to keep themselves safe, but to keep not only the job safe, but our community safe. So we need people that are not afraid to say, I have a question, or we need to look at this a little differently, or can we look at this before we start this? It's a critical skill that has to be there for us to keep our job sites safe.
Yeah, and I think almost every employer has some spectrum of safety that they care about, and so I think that's an important aptitude and mindset that's there. And so the other thing is, tell me a little bit about the progression of the veterans with you, because, as Steph mentioned, they come in with some experience, but then everyone's interested in not only getting to that first job, but what's the pathway for them?
Well, we have so many areas where we've had veterans progress. We've had degreed people come in, people that have taken maybe construction management while they've been in the military, or environmental studies. And they can be moved into project controls at an entry level and move their way up. People with technical skills. For example, we had a candidate come in that he fixed the satellites on bombers. Well, that's very technical. And he's now a reliability manager. Those technical skills can be well played into what we do. For millwrights, for pipe fitters, for a lot of other crafts too. Folks that have been in logistics, we do a lot of warehousing, a lot of ordering. They're great. They're great there. The key is also, sometimes you got to be willing to take a step back to take 3 steps forward. But we find that a lot of the different MOSs in the military do fit into everything we do. The keys are you willing to train? Are you willing and going to be patient to wait for an upgrade? Because there's got to be an opening for us to move you up. And it usually takes more than 90 days to get somebody moved up. But we have so many areas that what the military MOSs work for us.
So Steph, I'd be interested in kind of what are some of the key practices you're hearing from Carla that you would encourage other employers, as well as your own specific experience at NextOp, make this transition easier, but also, this idea that by partnering with you, you add value in a new way, but it also requires employers to adapt. So Carla obviously does that adaptability well, but if you had to synthesize kind of 3 or 4 points or more, what are some things employers can do to access this highly skilled critical talent pool?
Yes, so I think one of the things, especially Carla does, that everyone would benefit from is both managing expectations while keeping an open mind, right? And sometimes those two things don't go together very naturally. But she gave the example of someone who's done logistics in the military. You'd be surprised who may have had some pretty significant logistics experience, even though their resume may not say, like mine says logistics, right? I tell you what, some of these combat arms guys have moved significant gear, or aviators, right? And people supporting the aviation world. So, that open mind, and don't worry about the word, hear them out, and then think through, okay, where could I use this skill? And we do it on the intake side. Instead of asking, what do you want to do? We try and ask, like, what makes your day, right? Is it problem solving? Is it, do you like working with people and communicating, or what is it? And so we'll try and and Peter, I know this is huge for you, right? This kind of skills and qualities based. Then we try and hone in on, okay, what industries, what companies, what jobs? I think that's one. The other thing I would offer, and I know Turner does this, I think having a veteran resource group in your company. Katrina mentioned her veteran resource community group, but it is such an enabler for retention, but even hiring, even with Shell, I loved as a veteran going to different hiring events with the HR team. And all we were there to do was kind of try and translate and say, like, yeah, this one might be a good fit. But, without someone like that there, how does HR team know? So that's another way to kind of get something that it's, as a veteran, there's no one in a company that wants to hire more great veterans than the veterans already in your company. They don't want bad veterans, right? They want awesome performing veterans. And so you leverage that, desire to impact that company community is another one. I think, Carla, you guys do this day in, day out as well.
Right.
So what I'm hearing, from that, Steph, is leverage your veterans in a way to ensure that you don't have some sort of bias built in, because they can actually, if they're already performing well for you, to your point, they're always going to be able to identify similar traits in their fellow veterans. Is that a good way to think about it?
Yeah, and every veteran's not perfect, right? Or not perfect for that role. And that's a little bit of what we do, right? We don't put all 150 in front of an employer. We'll put the handful that are the right fits. But sometimes I think that's where we see, and people have had a bad experience maybe with hiring a veteran, it just wasn't the right fit because it's a pretty broad group. So how can you sort of minimize that risk further by engaging entities like us, internal, both? We've seen both, and that's great too. So, but everyone, we don't want to place someone that's not going to stay and grow with a company, right? And neither does your internal VRG.
And so I guess, Carla and Steph, any kind of final kind of words of advice and comments in terms of, what, we should be doing? Because there are a lot of key things that I think have been raised in this, but we probably are overlooking the veteran population in a really good way by, this space. Carla, any words of advice for employers?
Well, I think for employers, it's reach out to organizations like NextOp and let them support you and help you. For our veterans, the biggest thing I can say is take off the blinders. And just because you've done one thing doesn't mean that's all you can do, and be willing to look at other opportunities and try them, because you can end up with something that's pretty incredible if you're willing to take a bit of a chance. And as being married, to a Marine, we know that they have more get up and go than anyone else in the world. And opportunities are endless for people that are not willing to try.
Yeah. Steph?
Yeah, I think my biggest advice is to take a chance, right? So do it intentionally. We can be an asset there, or I'm sure Carla or anyone really, and make sure that it's the right veteran that you're taking a chance on. But take a chance on someone that doesn't have all 15 things in the job description that you've got posted, but has some other things. And when I look at all these people that I know, right, in the veteran population, God Jones is a good example. I mean, my husband is another example. He's in an engineer's role for the past, 8 years now, and he's not an engineer. So someone took a chance, right, and saw everything else. And I would challenge everyone, can you do that? And it's not easy because it's not just the recruiters, right? It's the hiring managers too. And I know that level struggles with it sometimes as well.
And that raises a good question, Carla. How do you work with your hiring managers on that point? Because Steph and I have had this conversation related to, that a lot of the issues that come up as we try to kind of widen the lens and bring more folks, into the workforce is, hiring managers believe, it needs a 4-year college degree on top of it or other things.
Yeah.
And how do you manage your hiring managers to kind of, take their blinders off?
Well, I got lucky and I stepped in an organization where the hiring managers are very open and willing to listen. I'm also in a position which a lot of people can't say is I have the respect of my organization, and they trust what I do. We work with each other. I listen to my management team and I listen to their needs. I listen to what it is they're really looking for. So when I come across candidates, I'm able to say to my hiring manager, here's the pieces they have, and it's exactly what they're, there has to be some fit, of course, but you have to have people that are very willing to work with veterans, and that's what we have here.
Yeah, but I also think, to your point, you persist through with your hiring managers to make sure that they get through that. I know you well enough that you're not going to take no when you particularly believe it. And I think that's a really big piece to this. But I also think, we in this kind of broader workforce space need to be thinking about, how are we, getting hiring managers to think differently about, and accessing new populations. I mean, the real issue today that, we read the headlines, employers can't find enough workers for the roles that they're looking for, which probably means we've got to start accessing different populations. And this is a really good point.
I mean, the good news is it's not just us. If you look at all the contributors to CMEF, we do through that industrial training committee, we actually do these really great boot camps for veterans. And that's how God Jones found his job. You know, it's amazing when you have a chance to sit and visit. And it's like I said, it's not just Turner. There's a lot of really great companies out there that are looking for help. One of the things I'm going to tell veterans they can do, my son did this because he didn't want my help. He wanted to do it on his own. He went to the Associated Builders and Contractors membership page. He found a list of companies that he was interested in talking to, and he sent out 200 letters in a course of 30 days with his resume, with a cover letter, and he sent it to upper level management. And he ended up with people calling him going, I don't know how you got that man's phone number and name, but he told me to give you an interview. And he has a great job now. He's a builder for Weston Homes and loves it. But, you know, he took the incentive and he took the time and he took the energy. And that's one of the keys to this.
Oh, and it sounds like they probably know Carla and they were not going to crosswise with you. Steph, any final comments before we end the session? It's been a really good chat with the both of you.
I mean, I could talk about this all day. And so I know there's probably some further conversations that if anyone would like to have, I know Carla is always game, as am I. And so I dropped mine and Alan's information in the chat, and I'm sure Peter and team will send it out as well. But I'm happy to help. You know, if people are in all, I guess that's the other thing I would maybe leave with is that no one's behind on this. Like, people are in all different places. Turner is obviously very mature in their veteran employment space, but we talk with companies all the time who are like, hey, I really want to start this. And that's totally okay too. And we're more than happy to kind of walk that journey with a company. And maybe the goal is, you know, 2 placements next year. And that's fine because that 2 turns into 10 and 15 down the line. But
I also think the one thing that Houston benefits from that most cities don't benefit from is a really great organization like NextOp, which is part of a broader set of services under Combined Arms. And I think we're really fortunate as a city to have that kind of leadership that is making this city welcoming for returning service members.
Absolutely. I mean, I think between the corporate structure and support here and industry-wise, I know our organization and our sister organizations that refer to each other for different veteran needs absolutely feel like we've got this great community here to serve both the veteran, but also serve the community with veterans, if that makes sense too.
Yeah. So Steph, Carla, thank you so much for spending time with us today. This is really a good session, and Steph knows I could chat with her all the time about this, and you know, we could go for hours, unfortunately, but we don't have that time. So, you know, I think you've given some really good advice, really good, helpful hints. But I also want to thank our audience for participating in the UpSkill Works Forum series today, and obviously throughout the year. And, you know, this is our final session for 2021. We will be back with some new ones and new conversations next year. And we will obviously continue this conversation to remind folks that veterans are a critical resource, an important resource and skilled resource for Greater Houston. So look for more information coming from us in the first part of the year. And until then, have a happy and safe holiday season, because we still need to maintain that safety, remembering that the Delta variant and Omicron are beginning to show up, and you know, we want people to be safe and healthy. So have a great holiday season. Thanks for joining us.